So this year, 2019, these are spring results. It marks the 5th administration of the PARCC assessment. The reason I'm saying PARCC is that in the fall block, when we gave that assessment, it was still called PARCC. When we gave it in the spring, it was called the New Jersey Student Learning Assessments. It is the 4th opportunity for us to actually give you data for 4 years and compare our students from year to year to year, and that's what our presentation will do this evening. Students did take the PARCC and the NJSLA in grades 3 through 11 in English Language Arts, and then in grades 3 through 8 in math, and then they took end-of-year assessments in algebra, algebra 2, and geometry for mathematics. So how do we begin talking about the results? As Mr. Trethewey shared with you, we did actually, every year we talk about reinstituting a district assessment committee. We reinstituted that last year. This year we actually even elevated that. We did assessment work with the principals and all building administrators over the summer. We had an expert come in. Her name is Dr. Tracy Severance. She actually spoke with us, my team at length, about what was our focus, what did we want, and basically it was just getting our administrators to be able to dive into the conversation about all the data points that they have accessible to them. And we're talking about data that you have day to day. We're talking about formative and both summative data. So when we talk about data, we really talk about data being interpreted carefully, obviously looking at the data, and then we actually talk about being very aware of making comparisons from grade level to grade level, because you have to be aware that those are not the same students. And so when you're looking at a 3rd grade assessment in 2018 comparing it to 2019, we're talking about different children. So just to be aware and cautious of that. As Mr. Trethewey shared with you, big variances or differences. There are no longer district factor groups. There's no longer the peer school. You'll see in this presentation, we actually took out the PARCC states. It's not necessary to compare. So basically, we are only comparing ourselves to the state. We also delve deeper and we compare ourselves to people that we consider like us in the county, and that's some of the work that we'll continue to do. In addition to that, we know that this is just a snapshot of time. It's a one assessment, and we use multiple measures, and we are committed to that. And then really at the bottom, we talk about what are we doing when we're unpacking data. We're looking closely at the level of the students to see what types of changes that we need, obviously to our curriculum, but also to our instructional practices. And then of course also, as you all know, we introduced our New Jersey tiered systems of support. So what changes or refinements do we need there? And when we say more relevant data to come, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we're doing here this evening. This is very important that we continue to get this information into the hands of our staff. Administrators are working with it, conveying it to our parents. So there is still a lot of work to be done here. These are the 5 performance levels, as you're all familiar with. We actually create all of our charts based upon the performance levels that are used on the state assessments. Level 5 is orange. We keep them color-coded the same way. When we're looking at data, we're looking for our 4s and 5s because we know that those are the students that have met expectations or have exceeded expectations. We're also looking for our levels of 3s and looking at what in particular do we need to work on for refinement to get them to our 4s and 5s, and then we're very aware of where are the students that are not meeting expectations and what do we need to do in terms of providing them and meeting them where they're at. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Nickel to come up. Before I hand it over to my team and obviously Mr. George, I just want to thank the team. We have done a tremendous job and they are a fantastic team of just really working on it, but also what I appreciate is we're looking at it across the district. Michelle doesn't, even though she's only presenting elementary, she is very involved in what's going on in the middle school and the high school, and it's vice versa for the others. We need a clear picture. We need to articulate our narrative across. We need to see connection. We need to see what instructional practices are working at what levels and what we need to enhance. So it's important to have this team approach. Of course, we bring in all the administrators to do that with us, but I have to commend my team because this has been, this is a lot of work, but of course it was a little bit more intense this time because of being very careful with the vocational students and making sure that what we're presenting this evening is accurate. So now I'm going to ask Mrs. Nickel to come up here.
Okay, so we're going to start with the elementary schools and English language arts. The next few slides you'll be able to see our performance based on the district and how we compare to the state. The performance levels are outlined just as Mrs. Pedroza had explained them to you with the color bands. The blue is our level 1s, the reds are our level 2s, the yellow is our level 3 approaching, the green is our meeting expectations, and the orange is our exceeding expectations. So a great visual is just to take the green and slide it across and see how many of our students are meeting or exceeding the expectations, and also compared to the state. So our third grade ELA students in 2019 were 52.2% proficient compared to the state, which was 50.2% proficient. In fourth grade, it's outlined the same exact way. You can see that our fourth grade students performed at 62.1% proficient compared to the state of 57.4% proficient. And our fifth grade ELA scores was 55.6% proficient compared to the state, which was 57.9% proficient.
On to the middle school, we had 37.2% proficient compared to the state at 56.1% for sixth grade. Seventh grade, we had 48.7% compared to the state at 62.8%. In eighth grade, we had 50.8% compared to the state at 62.9%. High school is a little different because there are several pathways in order to meet the graduation requirement. Students can pass the ACT, SAT, PSAT, NJSLA, the AccuPlacer, or the ASVAB test to meet their graduation requirement. And if they don't do it through those pathways, they can also fulfill the portfolio appeals process. So for English 9, we had 41.2% compared to the state at 54.8%. 10th grade, this is the 39.4% to 57.4%. And 11th grade, because we had less students take the assessment, many students had already met their graduation requirement. We had 21% rather, and 31.14 was the state average.
So for the next set of charts that we will be showing you, this is looking at students. We think it's important that we look and follow our students as they grow from one grade level to the other, and also look at them as they compare to the state. So the first slide is our current fifth graders. They took the PARCC assessment as third graders and the NJSLA as fourth graders. And you can see that as third graders, our district is the yellow and our state is the red. So our district in third grade was 61.1, and as fourth graders, those students went to 62.1. The state went from 58%, and this is meeting and exceeding expectations, to 57.4%. Our current sixth graders are students that took the PARCC in 2017 as third graders. They took the PARCC as fourth graders in 2018, and they took the NJSLA as fifth graders. So our district went from 50% meeting and exceeding to 60.1 meeting and exceeding to 55.6, whereas the state went from 50 to 58 to 57.9 meeting or exceeding expectations.
As Mrs. Nichols said, every dot represents a data point and the year of the student. So as third graders, our students were 38%. As fourth graders, they were 51. Fifth graders, 51.5. And then as sixth graders, 37.2. As eighth graders, you can see they started as third graders, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And these are our current ninth graders who started at 58.4 and 50.8 as eighth graders.
So moving on to math, these charts are set up in the same exact fashion where you will see the levels of proficiency with blue level 1, red level 2, yellow level 3, and 4s and 5s are where it's meeting and exceeding expectations. So for third grade math last year, we performed at 64.4% meeting or exceeding, and the state performed at 55.1 meeting or exceeding expectations. Fourth grade students in 2019 performed at 44.5% meeting or exceeding expectations compared to the state, which was 51% meeting and exceeding. And our fifth grade students in 2019 performed at 48.3% proficient or meeting or exceeding expectations, and the state was 46.8 meeting or exceeding expectations.
So for the sixth grade at the middle school, we have, I have to put my glasses on because I can't see. We have middle school being at 37.8 and the state being at 40.6 for this assessment. For seventh grade, we're looking at 42.2 for our seventh graders and the state being at 42.1. Our eighth grade is at 41.7 and the state performed at 29.3. Algebra 1, we performed at, gotta turn my page, 31.3 for the district and the state performed at 41.3. Geometry, we're looking at 27.4 for our district, and the state performed at 30.9. And Algebra 2, we performed at 26.8, and the state performed at 44.1.
What are some of the things that might affect the algebra 2?
Well, when we're looking at the Algebra 2, one of the things that we're looking for are additional resources. Right now, our resources that we are using are dated. So this year we are putting together our committee to find more adequate materials for our high school teachers to gather data and to be able to do more of the formative assessment needed in order to guide their instruction within the classroom.
I think, and again, correctly, I think our top algebra 2 students will probably have already met the graduation.
Correct.
level.
Well, and that's the other thing, when you're looking at the testing requirements for high schoolers. You know, our Algebra 1s in the 8th grade, a lot of them meet their testing requirements at that point. So determining what kids are taking the assessment, what are they doing when they're sitting in front of the assessment and actually taking it. And then as we get on there, you know, you have other kids, maybe 11th graders, they're actually going into other math courses and not even taking Algebra 2. So there's a lot of different
I think that's
parameters.
something you have to drill down. If they are,
Yeah.
if our top students are indeed taking algebra 2 and they're not performing well, then that's a different situation. If our top students aren't taking the test, because of other graduation requirements, then we have to. I think it's
Exactly.
something to look at. I don't know the answer to that, but
Yeah.
that is a possibility.
And like Ms. Saraceno said, we are looking at the item analysis and really drilling down into the evidence statements and also the actual standards and looking at the language there and seeing how it correlates to our curriculum and seeing when the delivery of those standards are in relationship to when assessments are given. So it's a lot of work, but it's something that has to be done and, you know, dug deeper for.
Yes.
So the next set of charts is student growth, looking at same groups of students as they take the assessment from one year to the next compared to the state. The district is in yellow and the state is in red. So these students in third grade took the PARCC assessment and performed at 55.8, and as fourth graders went to 44.5. The state started at 53 as third graders and went to 51%, meeting or exceeding expectations. This is our current sixth graders. So as third graders, they performed at 47%, as fourth graders, 38.5%, and as fifth graders, 48.4% compared to the state, which was 53% to 49.4% to 46.8%.
So this is our sixth graders, and we're looking at what they performed as third graders. We have 46%, 38%, 37.5, and 37.8. So pretty much going in line there. The state, as you can see, the same parallel line kind of, and then dropped a little bit in the same year. Our seventh grade, we're going from a 34.7 and ending up by the time that they're in this grade, seventh graders, 42.2. And as we're looking at it again, we're looking at a growth, slight fluctuation in the scores, and then kind of ending up where the state was. Our eighth grade, we're looking at the state, again, district-wise, they're growing and kind of leveling off here. We have to also remember this right here, we're talking about seventh grade. Our honor seventh graders are in this group when they're taking the seventh grade assessment. When this group, as eighth graders, take the assessment, we're taking out all the honors eighth graders. So these, when we incorporate the eighth graders into there, because I played with the numbers, we're up in close to the 50% range. So there actually would show growth.
And interesting about the state.
Yeah, the state just dove. Yeah.
To try to explain to you, this year we are presenting also of our subgroups. You will know that subgroups are really broken out when we actually do our performance reports. When we get actually the state reports, subgroups are broken out a little bit differently. They're done by grade level. However, we actually decided to be able to keep confidentiality. We actually did them by elementary, middle school, and high school. We also had a lot of conversation about the way we would present this to you in terms of students, because some of these numbers actually, there are 2 students in a subgroup. So I certainly could try to answer some of that for you, but of course we were trying to keep confidentiality for our students. We also realized that when you're looking at subgroups, that it became very apparent when Maureen and I were actually pulling kids out for the VOC students, that there were multiple students in multiple subgroups. So one student could actually be in multiple subgroups here, which is something that was very apparent to us. So we'll begin right now with our expectations of our subgroups for meeting and exceeding for English language arts. You'll see that the Latinos all the way down to our ELLs. Our ELLs, we did not have any students that met or exceeded expectation. However, I do want you to be aware that those students both were third graders, and they actually were year 1 and 2 in the program. So it was a very small number, but we also had students, I cross-referenced just to see how long had they been in our ESL program. One student had just started the program 1 year, one student had been in 2 years. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. The next slide is actually our district elementary subgroups for math. You'll see here that we actually had, once again, a subgroup that we actually really are focusing on in particular And when we met with CUSAC, and we actually met last year, we were looking at the economically disadvantaged, and we were looking at our special ed. So therefore, we did a lot of work in our curriculum to make sure that we had modifications and interventions that specifically addressed those particular areas. The next subgroups that we're looking at are our middle school, ELA. So where we actually have an asterisk, there were no students at all in this particular category. Where you'll see the English language learners, those particular students were 0 years in a program. They had just been identified. Those L students had just come to our country. They had been here for a year. Then they were expected to take the test. So therefore, and we cross-referenced that with where they were performing on their access testing to see if there was a correlation, and there definitely was. Middle school mathematics, once again, I'm sorry I'm being repetitive, but the asterisk once again means that there were no students in that particular subgroup. We're talking about the same Ls, or English language learners, that took that test. For us, it really was very apparent that our conversation needs to be about these particular students in these particular areas. The reason I'm saying that is because the number was very high in that particular area, and then of course the meeting and exceeding was low. And by high, I'm talking about economically disadvantaged was 191 students. So we actually look at that to see how many comprise of that subgroup and how many students it's impacting. High school students, language arts. Here we have, once again, no students in our American Indian or Alaskan Native. We actually have, this particular subgroup was very small as well. It probably should have been suppressed, but it was broken out for our, at our high school level. Of course, here, once again, we're looking at our economically disadvantaged. There were 204 students that fell into this category. And a part of this, and we probably should have included it, was what's the state percentage for this, and I apologize, but we didn't. But that's something that we look to as well, just to see how those subgroups throughout the state performed. Mathematics, very similar. And once again, economically disadvantaged would be a subgroup that we would certainly be looking at in our students with disabilities.